السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أهلا بكم معنا اليوم في الموسم الثالث من أسبوع التصميم الداخلي العربي. نبدأ مباشرة في أول محاضرات with Nada Dips entitled Empowering Marginalized Craft Communities. Nada Dips Journey Through Lebanon, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Nada, we thank you again for being with us today, and we're glad having you in the first lecture today.
Me and really this is a beautiful initiative to connecting people. I'm really happy to share my stories and my experiences.
Yes.
And thank you very much for having me. What I'd like to do is to share my experiences, and it's really about the craft communities, not only in the countries that that Muhammad mentioned, but I'm also adding Syria and Lebanon, the Palestinian community in Lebanon, and also lately Uzbekistan. So the whole idea is really, I've become known to be the person who actually elevates craft because I've added a design element to craft. And for me, it's really about highlighting the importance of preserving traditional craftsmanship and supporting these local artisans. Eventually, this role of design creates sustainable livelihoods. And so I'm going to get started. I will share my screen.
Go ahead.
Okay. Is it clear? Is everyone able to see?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to start a little bit with, I can't seem to go, okay. Just a little bit about myself, how I started. Some of you may know my story. I grew up in Japan, and living in Japan, you notice that craft is an elevated art. And when I moved to Lebanon 22 years ago, I saw that craft was cheap souvenirs in the bazaars of souks in Syria and different parts of Lebanon. And I was really surprised that we don't have an elevated craftsmanship. And so I set about to work on this. And hence, I call myself a craft custodian. I feel very responsible for craft of our region and for trying to elevate it and let it be actually cool. We don't want it to be just traditional. It's very beautiful. But I think that my role as someone who has come in from outside is really to elevate it. So the way I found out is really when I once went to Istanbul and I visited Topkapi Palace. And in this palace, I saw this great room of gifts. And in this great room of gifts, I saw this beautiful handwork that was done by the emperors, that was gifted by the emperors of the Silk Route. So you had beautiful embroidery, carving, chest of drawers, boxes. And for me, I was thinking how beautiful they are even till now. And that means that craft really stands the test of time. So that reminded me of how my family actually went to Japan, because my great uncle went in 1917 from Damascus, because it was called Greater Syria at the time. Lebanon was part of Greater Syria. And he had lived in Shanghai a little bit and heard of opportunities in Kobe, Japan. And he took a boat to Kobe and settled there. And my father went a few generations later. But what's interesting about the Silk Route is the amount of exchange that happens in the know-how. So like silk, of course, went to Venice. You have pottery that went to, ceramics went to Turkey. You have glass making went to Bohemia. So there's a lot of exchange of ideas and know-how. In a way, I have my own personal Silk Route, which is growing up in Japan, living in America, studying there at the Rhode Island School of Design, moving to London for my first job, and then moving back to Lebanon, to Beirut. And I feel like it's, in a way, I was going back to my roots because I had this hunger to understand who I am, where I came from. So you can see me here. I don't really look like anybody Japanese. And so I used to be like all those photographed as a little child. I didn't fit. It was like, you know, I wanted to belong. I wanted people around me to be like me. And so in a way, this journey that I've been taking back to Lebanon is a way of me finding my roots and my belonging. So what do we learn from Japanese design? So where I grew up, Japanese have this kind of philosophy of less is more. And in a way that comes from how they perceive God. So when you look at the Japanese religions, it's mostly a lot of it is about silence and meditation and removing, you know, keeping the mind empty. And so in a way, if they were to give a gift to God, probably it would be like something that's minimalist because they want something pure and simple. So I think that this is the way they have come to this kind of aesthetics of simplicity and beauty. I moved to the States after that, and in America, it's a young country, so there's nothing that they can look back on, but they had a whole future to look at. And for them, they had the glass and steel industries, and they were very, very practical in their approach to design. They had the shaker style, which is very functional, simple, no nonsense kind of furniture and objects. And so this is where I understood the value of practical things. Then I moved to London because I was looking for this community of Arabs, and I thought, no, maybe in London I can relate. And in London, well, as opposed to America, what was really interesting is that they revered the past. So everywhere I went, I would walk into an antique store. At that time, contemporary furniture was not yet popular in London in the 90s and early 2000. They were actually really interested in traditional antiques. So I would learn about marquetry or hand carving. And this is really where I learned to appreciate handcraft. The photo of this cigar box is actually of David Lindley, who's the son of Princess Margaret. And he had just started a company where he was using the craft of marquetry in a kind of contemporary way. So it was like a very much of an eye-opener for me. So if you look at the first pieces of furniture I designed, they really have no influence from the Arab world, let's say. This is all still influences, I guess, mostly from Japan and living in the States and in the UK. And then I decide, so I moved to Lebanon and I am like, where is Middle Eastern furniture? And they're like, oh, you're going to find something maybe in Syria. So I visit Damascus. And this is the furniture I see. This is kind of what they call the Ottoman style, because Damascus became the center over time for designing and creating this mother of pearl inlay technique for the Ottoman Empire. So if you look at their philosophy of design or craft, in a way, it's about more is more, as opposed to the Japanese, less is more. Because when you really look at Islamic work or Islamic design, it's really about repetition. And this repetition and is actually, you see it a lot in architecture, this repetition and knowledge and the repetition of the Quranic verses, it gives value to the importance of more being more. And so that's my conclusion of why, like, what they thought is like, if they want something rich, it has to be more. So I wanted to know how it was made. And so I went to visit the traditional crafts. And it was very hard to find good craftsmen in Damascus. And usually it's written in small doors. You enter this small, humble door, and you find this beautiful workshop full of, you know, people hammering and carving and doing inlay. And for me, it was like such a beautiful process, but I was like a little bit, how do you say, hesitant in saying that I don't think the people would like this thing. Like I was thinking about myself and a lot of people of my generation, that would they be interested in buying this traditional? Maybe they need something new. And so what I did is I set out and asked them to create this little rectangular panel of triangles or circles or squares. And they would beg me, they're like, why don't you add the flowers and, you know, some foliage? And I said, no, I just want something very geometric and simple. And I brought it back to Beirut and created this very simple bedside table. Today, it looks a bit boring, but at that time, 20 years ago, it was quite revolutionary. Because for once, for the first time, I was able to take this traditional craft and suddenly give it new life. And people started to see this as a contemporary piece. And what it did to me was it made me start looking at, oh, you know, maybe I can do that with the traditional pieces. So here I would take a traditional table and simplify the lines and then add a new material. Or like a bench like this becomes a bench like that. Or a chest of drawers like this has become something a little bit more pure. And also I had like Japanese influences, not only Middle Eastern. So you have this Japanese furniture, which is the staircase furniture, because their homes were small. So they always had to benefit from all the spaces that they had. And I would make furniture using some inlay. And screens is something very common that's in Japan, but also in our part of the world. So I would do a msharabiyya, but in plexiglass. So the msharabiyya in general is used for women to look out, but not to be seen. But today we don't really have that problem. So I made it in plexiglass. Calligraphy is something very revered in Japan, as well as in the Middle East. And also hand carving, a lot of like natural motifs. So here you have the chrysanthemums, but here we put like some roses. So again, also the influence of architecture. So I guess most of you know that the Islamic geometry usually starts with like the circle, which means unity and infinity and God. And it's the repetition of these patterns of the circles with the polygons, and those create those patterns. So I started to apply these patterns, not like it was being used in architecture, but it wasn't used in furniture. So I started to apply it on furniture. And in a way, pattern and geometry became this common language, and it became a connection to our identity. And so the furniture that was done during the Ottoman times is called Ottoman style. And since we don't have a name for what we are doing today, I called it Neo-Arabian, which is something that really elevates us as Arabs, and it's a new Arab identity. And as you can see, it's a lot about repetitive patterns and geometry. And here you see some of the way I experimented with the craftsmen. And again, I wanted something pure and simple. And you know, it was really hard at the beginning to work with these craftsmen. And the challenges was mainly that I had to pick and choose, because some of the craftsmen were very stubborn and were not willing to change. Whereas others I could see the sparkle in their eye when I tell them, can you experiment with this? Can you try that? And these are the people I would actually choose. Here's another pushing the craft, where I took the mother of pearl and I stained it and created this kind of effect, which is more of a airbrush technique effect. So the idea is to keep pushing the craftsmen to come up with these new ways of doing things. Here, and what's really interesting is that this is catching the eye of international brands. And one of the brands is Fratelli Rossetti, which is a well-known Italian shoe brand. And they focus a lot on craft. And one of the brothers, the three Fratelli brothers, the Rossetti brothers, came to Beirut to our showroom, and they saw that we were working with craft, and they asked us to create these heels. So this is something that for me is like a very, it's very good for us Arabs that we are being recognized internationally for our craft and artisan. Here's another craft, which is the craft of marquetry that we see in the backgammon games. And again, instead of using the traditional backgammon colors, I started to use like much more sober colors, black and white or color. This is the black and white series I did. And it's really today a very contemporary piece, but it comes from a very traditional craft. And so this is something that I feel is we can keep doing. And and it's still respecting the traditional craft. Here's the hand carving. Again, we're just putting a little bit of hand carving. And this sofa is kind of like a little bit of using the Japanese joinery, but with a little touch of hand carving. That reminds us of our identity. So here I come and I say Palestine, but it's actually really the marginal Palestinian community in the camps in Lebanon. So I was commissioned by 81 Designs. It's an NGO based in Abu Dhabi. And they asked me to design something with the Palestinian embroiderers. So the way I approach is first to visit them and to build a relationship and a connection. So I brought my whole team and we sat with them, we listened, we saw all their projects that they worked on. And I decided that I wanted to challenge them on something they haven't done before. I also asked them to come and visit me to our studio, because after listening to their story, I wanted them to hear how I think and how we operate and how we like to use tradition, but do it in a contemporary way. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask them to not embroider on fabric, but to embroider on cane. I'm going to show you a video, just a 2-minute video of the whole story. Here we go. The essence of this collection is really about belonging to a community, to an identity, to a nation, and belonging to a land, because this is the essence of us human beings. I think we all have this need to belong. I was invited by 81 Designs to create a collaboration using the Palestinian women in the Ain Halwi camp. They work with embroidery, but this time what we decided is that we wanted to apply this embroidery on our furniture. Actually, this chair. So it will be placed in the back. This was a challenge for them because they've never worked with a rigid material. They've always worked with soft materials.
أنا تطريز هويتي، تطريز الفلسطيني على طول بنعمل قطبة الأكس. هلأ ندى مثلا طلبت قطب كتير غير الأكس، اقترحت إنه يكون الشغل نافر، يعني تكون الشجرة نافرة. هذا بتحسه تطوير.
Even craft has to adapt as well. If we keep doing embroidery on fabric, people will stop seeing it. It just disappears in people's eyes. So when you introduce a new material or new technique, suddenly the craft is given new life.
طرزنا اشياء كثير، بس القش هي خطوه جديده بعدها مش مارقه علينا. هذيك شوف جغرافيه فلسطين، يعني هي لوحه معبره عن اصول الواحد وجذوره، انه هو والله من هيدي البلاد، وبنبسط فيها كثير هو عم بطرزها.
We chose the subject of the Palestinian landscape because it's been something that has surfaced a lot recently.
نحن بنقول إنه تطريز الفلسطيني هو إثبات وجودنا، هويتنا هو.
So while they're working, they felt like dreaming of returning.
الواحد يكون محروم من بلده وما قادر يوصل من كده بيتعرف عليها من هالشغلات، شو يعني.
fact that we're actually dividing the landscape in 7 different chairs is like everyone who purchases the chair will have a piece of the land. So it's again about belonging, and it's about a community, and it's about the individual versus the group.
يا عيونك سود وحلوة يا عيونك يا عيونك.
So these are the chairs that were made at the end, because when we shot the video, the chairs were not ready. And here are the 7 chairs. So each chair had the name of the craftswoman. So what it did is it actually made each woman feel really proud of herself. And for me, pride, the emotional element is so important in what we do. And craftsmen, they cannot help but working with emotions. So we have to always be very sensitive to that. Okay, so then in 2017, I went to visit Afghanistan. I was invited by an initiative to empower the women carpet weavers in Kabul. And it was a workshop that supported these women and their children. They had schools, they had a special clinic for health. And it was quite a challenge to actually come up with a new design for carpets. So it was really difficult also at the time to be inspired, because even if you see me walking here on the streets, actually this was a shot. We could only go down from the car for like 5 minutes because it was quite dangerous. And so I wanted just, to photograph this unusual architecture. It seemed like it was stuck in the 80s with like, very blocky colors and very geometric shapes. So for the first thing I did was to understand really how the process of carpet making is. So first, they gather all the wool, and you can see this warehouse full of wool. And what happens after this is that the older women in the community, they do what they call spinning. So I sat with them and I tried to understand how they make it. So they take this wool and they make them into yarn. And the men are the ones who are actually discuss colors and all the natural dyes. So here they were showing me the different kinds of dyes that they use. So for example, when it comes to a beige color, they would use walnut, or, like when it comes to red, I think they would use, I forgot, but they had like different natural dyes. And so, even the kilns were done in a very natural way. And the colors were spectacular because they were so strong. And you can see this room full of the wool. And it was so inspiring to see these colors. And the beauty of it is that they're all nuanced. So there's not one specific color, like each yarn has like shades of colors. And so here, if you can see the way they painted, so some people today, they use, of course, the computer, but in their case, they were still painting the patterns with by hand. So every little square is a knot. And what the women do is they count the knots and the colors, and they create their carpet. And here they finally finalized the colors, and we selected the actual wool color as well, and they got started. So of course, it's not so easy. I tried to sit with them and try to work, but it's actually extremely difficult. And the difference between the older women who do the yarn and the younger women who do the actual weaving is that the younger woman can see better. And by the time they get older, they can't see so well. So it's much harder to do carpet weaving because every string they have to pull and knot the yarn. So these are some of the processes. What I wanted to do was to create a carpet that kept and retained its tradition. So I didn't change the actual traditional pattern, but what I did is I superimposed a secondary pattern, and I'll show you later the final carpet. And here, just to show you that part of really working with these, with the communities is really being part of the community. And so I sat with them, and I showed some of my work and what we do. And this way they will understand where I'm coming from when I do ask them to do something that's not normal for them. So I befriended the whole team. They're really a wonderful group of women, all very beautiful, actually. And this is the carpet collection that we finally made. And we call this You and I, because it's really about duality. It's about, the past and the present. And it's about different shapes and it's about love, actually, because it's about, like, you could be two different people, but when you come together, there's something that's common, this common element. And this is how what I did is as you can see, I've shaved part of the carpet so that it looks like it's two carpets, but it's actually woven as one. And this is a prayer rug, a meditation carpet, which I call transcendence, because I felt that when we say a prayer carpet, it sounds Islamic, but when you really think of it, when people do yoga, they sit on a carpet as well. So basically we're meditating, and the shape is formed in a way to represent kind of like a lot of the spiritual spaces. So mosques, churches, everybody. We all have these archways and arcades where you actually go, in a way, going to another world, which is a spiritual world. So I call this meditation carpet transcendence, because I feel like we're transcending all religions to spirituality. And from that whole concept, I started to create other carpets, like this carpet, which is a more circular carpet. So it started with a very simple concept of preserving the traditional carpet pattern and introducing something new. And then it just became like a whole design where I can apply it in so many different shapes and sizes. Okay, I think about 2 years ago, I visited Pakistan, and I was also invited by Lel. Lel is a mother-daughter duo who works with marble inlay. And they invited me to Peshawar. And Peshawar is on the border of Afghanistan. And there's a lot of Afghan refugees who actually live in Peshawar. So in Peshawar, I went to visit one of the most inspiring places, which is what they do, the truck art. So they have a whole world of truck art where they paint on trucks, because a lot of the people from Peshawar actually drive trucks throughout the country, transporting many things. So for them, it's like their home. So they go around and they actually design their trucks. And a lot of the trucks cost a lot of money, but they still insist because it's like their home. So what I was very much inspired by is really their colors. And they have these beautiful, beautiful stones from the mountains. And so what I did is I sat with the craftsmen there, and we looked at all these beautiful stones and the stone color. And we wanted to create something using this stone colors and the shades and the degradation of these colors, because I think that for me, instead of doing something that copied that truck art, which was so inspiring for me, I thought, what if we blend all the truck art colors into like something very smooth? I have a video also to show this. Lel invited me to collaborate on a collectible piece that brings our two worlds together.
I feel very few designers have reinterpreted craft for the contemporary audience the way Nada has. And I can really relate to her journey as a female designer.
On my first visit to Peshawar, I was intrigued by the colors that were in the city, specifically the truck art, which is specialty in Pakistan. To me, those colors drew a parallel to the marble that Lel used.
Through this collaboration, we would like to draw the world's attention to Peshawar's layered history and the fine craftsmanship that has existed here for centuries.
At the workshop, I was able to work with all these beautiful marble stones. The best thing I thought was to create a degradation effect that would blend all the colors together in a very natural way. Taking a solid marble and having to cut them in little pieces, put them like a puzzle, and curve around them is really an intricate task that only a master craftsman can do. Just like we work with marginal communities, like the Syrian refugees that come to Lebanon, in this case, the Afghan refugees have come to Peshawar to also work on their craft techniques. So it's a very interesting parallel between the two cultures. So now this table is actually carried by a gallery in Paris called Gallery BSL. And for me, and also for Lel, we're very proud to have something from our part of the world in Europe. And also this will be now exposed in December in also in the US at Design Miami. So, you know, this is a way for me to feel that we're actually really giving new life to craft, as well as giving these opportunities for these craftsmen to do something new. So recently, in January, I was actually invited to Uzbekistan. And I don't know if you're aware, but Uzbekistan now is opening up very much. I don't know if you've been hearing at, for example, the Venice Biennale in architecture. They've had a beautiful stand. And they've been also in the Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris, showing their beautiful craft. So now they're making a lot of headway, and they're pushing their culture internationally. And one of the things they did is to invite me to visit them and possibly to produce some furniture and objects in a contemporary way. So again, what I did was I was being inspired by the architecture, and it's spectacular work, things that I haven't seen before. Of course, there's a lot of Persian influence, but the colors, the architecture, the grandeur, the patterns, these were all extremely inspiring. And of course, somehow related, because it's also, I think, Islamic part of it. So I went to visit people in brass, ceramics, hand carving. And to me, what stood out mostly was the hand carving techniques. So I would try to experiment, and it's, of course, very difficult to do, but it was really nice and pleasant to see how they work. So no one knows about this yet, so I'm telling you all, you're the first to know. So I've been invited to actually design something called a tapchan. And this is the craftsman that after meeting so many, we finally decided to work with. So he is celebrating 70 years and he's a master craftsman and he created a special carving technique. So this is like his traditional work. And what he does is he stains the wood. And so he stains it in a dark color and then he carves out of it so that the natural wood color comes out. And so I thought, how interesting. There was so much to be inspired by in Uzbekistan, but somehow this particular craft has inspired me the most. And so what I'm commissioned to do today is actually do a modern version of this tapchan. This is called a tapchan, and tapchan is actually a 4-poster kind of bench, which is about 3 meters by 3 meters. And people eat on it, they sleep on it, they socialize. And obviously here, it's a very, very traditional version. And this is this master craftsman's piece of work, which is also extremely traditional. And he specializes a lot, if you can see the columns in the back, in like architectural columns, and they spend hours just carving. So what I wanted to do was sit with him and explain how I work and show him what I would like to do with the tapchan. So I'm not showing you the surprise because I want it to be a surprise, but this is kind of like the form. So I went to visit his workshop and I started to work on something much more delicate and a little bit lighter. But what I wanted to focus mostly was really the hand carving technique. So what I did is instead of staining the wood that's dark and then taking out the color, I asked them to paint a panel in white and then asked the guys to carve in. And so you get this kind of like natural wood coming out of the white. So this is kind of some of the techniques that I've tried to work on. So nothing is final yet because I'm still in the process. Here we tried to put this panel, but I decided that it's too crowded. So what I do is really like experiment with different ways of doing things. So I'm just leaving it as a surprise for all of you. But this is kind of the end. I think I'm a little bit over time. But I just wanted to say that when it comes to really working with craft communities and traditional craftsmen, it's so important that you actually listen and observe and respect their tradition. And they need to really feel that you're really involved in how they think and how they work. And then that's when you actually introduce yourself and say that, you know, we're not there to take over, we're not there to change, but we're just there to elevate. And yeah, this is it. I just hope that encourages you to see how it is to work with and create like something contemporary out of tradition.
Thank you, Nada. It was very informative and impressive indeed. We have plenty of questions and we have about 6 minutes, so we can take some questions. First of all, back to the Palestinian works that you did. Was it displayed out of the Middle East, let's say, where it supports the case?
Yes, actually it was displayed in Abu Dhabi Art. And also we made another set of chairs that is exhibited now today in Paris.
Another question about the added value targeting or empowering the marginalized communities. What was the added values to you as an international designer, and maybe in general, any designer who would be encouraged today to focus on empowering these marginalized communities?
Actually, well, we have a lot of craft that nowhere around the world has it, you know? And so for me, I think it's so important that we actually give an opportunity to these craftsmen because it is their livelihood. Before they were very busy and they had a lot of work. But like sometimes I go to places and, you know, they're depressed, miserable, they don't have work anymore. And for me, actually, like today, sometimes I visit Damascus, even if it's not very good, or even Egypt. And I see some of the people creating objects that look similar to what I do. And I'm actually not disturbed. I'm actually really happy because I feel like I've given them this chance to actually have a new identity in the work. And it gives them, it brings them livelihood. They're now producing work for many others. So it's not only, through me that this contemporary look, it's now starting to create this ripple effect throughout craft communities, whether it's Egypt or Syria or other places.
What is the most material you liked during your journey?
Actually, recently, it's funny, I've been really enjoying embroidery, although it's very far from what I'm doing, but I still love wood, and I think wood is such a beautiful material, and we can still create something new with it. So I'm always pushing the craft of wood, and also, inlay work. But I'm also really loving ceramics, which I have not experimented with yet, and brass. So there's so much more to do. So it's very exciting.
I have a question here from Hind regarding noticing you repeated some of the design using the same different materials. You repeated the designs but using different materials. Is it a coincidence, or you mean that?
Let's say, like, if it comes to geometry, maybe. But when it comes to geometry, I feel it's really part of our identity. So yes, I sometimes use geometry in fabric and embroidery, as well as in mother of pearl or in tin inlay, or same as in the marble work. In a way, it's an identity of our brand as well. And so when I feel people come to me to work on a design, I always incorporate geometry because I assume that they expect that from me. They expect that I work with geometric patterns. But I also really believe that geometry is a universal language. It's a language that anybody can understand without words. And so for me, also geometry is an emotional language. You look at a repetitive pattern and you're elated, and there's something that draws you towards it. And so for me, it's so important that I create objects that appeals to many people and many cultures. I like to transcend, and that's a word that I use a lot, to transcend different cultures and religions and nationalities, because I feel that I like to see the oneness in human beings.
I have a question from Sarah. When did the shift happen from being a designer to a brand and a thriving business?
Yeah, it's funny because I sometimes wonder how that happened too. It just really creeps up on you. But I recall for many years I was just designing, and someone came along and said, "Why don't you brand yourself?" And I said, "What do you mean brand?" Because I never studied marketing or, branding. What do you mean brand yourself? And they said, well, you take your pieces and you put your name in it. And from all the things that you made, we kind of find a common element among everything. And so we did this exercise. So I had by then designed maybe 100 pieces, and I didn't even know about branding. And so what we did is we had pictures of everything, and we're like, okay, this piece, does it fit the criteria? Yes. Okay, this will be branded. Another design, does this fit this criteria? No. Okay, this one doesn't count. And so what ended up was really that there was this identity that became very strong, and that became the brand. And then we started eliminating things. Even in the showroom, I used to carry things from everywhere. I used to go to the flea market and bring all kinds of you know, furniture and lamps and accessories to mix and match with my pieces. And we just decided we're going to remove everything and just focus on Nada Debis products and Nada Debis name. And so when my showroom was full of objects and it was like almost like a flea market itself, it became this minimalist showroom with small objects or objects that stood out with a white background. And so this was the beginning of me becoming a brand.
Nada, thank you again for accepting our invitation and being with us today. And we are glad having you. See you very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.